Hey, I'm back. This is Chandler for Melda Production. And today I thought I'd do a follow-up on the analog filter video I did in MTurboFilter. So some people ask me a little bit more about the syntax and the feedback and a few other things. So I thought I'd go over them here. And so if you weren't quite sure what I was doing or you want more information on how to do this and the different syntax, etc., I'll try to go over some cool things in here. Okay, so we're starting off and we just have basic sound with a saw wave. Nothing too interesting there. Let's turn on MTurboFilter here. It starts out with what we want basically, which is low pass fast. You could use some other filter, but let's do this one because I think this is the one people are probably most interested in. That's what happens if you turn up the Q value. Now, just by itself, you see it doesn't have any other syntax here. And that's just because if you don't put anything in, it'll put the default values in there. So let's look in here. If you click this little question mark here, it will actually tell you about the syntax. Now here, this is basically all the stuff. You can read this yourself and it shows you how to do it. Let's skip down here into the area where we have the filters. So first you have the basic filters. These are, I think, the biquads here. And then we have the fast filters here. Now, we use these, and you see the first one, if we put it in something in parentheses, you have the frequency, you have the Q value, you have the gain. Although it should be noted, the gain doesn't do anything inside the low pass filter, so you can kind of leave that blank. Inside the peak filter, it will do something, but here it won't, so don't even worry about it. Just leave it completely blank, and then you have the feedback. One thing I have noticed, I think there's an error here. There should be something else. If you look in the normal ones, you see it has the exact same thing, but it has this analog parameter. And that, I believe, is actually in here, but it's not written, so that's a slight mistake. And then after that, you have the feedback parameter. So you might be wondering, like, how do you use the feedback? If you see here, you just set it to a number like 0, etc. Or I think it goes to 0 to 1 or even -1 if you want negative feedback. But you can actually control that using this knob. But the parameter here, instead of F or Q, it's going to be FB for feedback. So I'll show you how to do that. Let's do it in here. Just remember this: frequency, Q value, gain, analog, and then feedback, even though you don't see analog here. So we'll go in here. We're going to put our parentheses here. F for frequency. That's going to be controlled here. Next is Q. We could just leave these blank and it'll automatically assign it, but I'm doing this just so you can see what's happening. The next value is our gain. We're not going to do anything with the gain. It doesn't do anything anyways. So we're just going to put another one in here. Then we have the analog. That's not going to do anything either. And then we'll do FB for feedback and then close our parentheses here. Okay. And yeah, like I said, the analog and the gain are both going to be set to 0 by default. So now if we move this, is exactly as we expect. But now let's move it down a little bit. What happens if we move the feedback knob? It gets really loud, so you might want to turn the limiter on for this while you're doing this. The more feedback we have, it's going to take down that Q value and just boost everything below it. So if you want that, you can do it. And let's look at what happens if you turn it into negative feedback. Yeah. If you get to near negative 100% feedback, it's gonna, whistle. But below that, it actually creates a higher Q value. So that's something you can exploit if you want. But that's basically how the feedback works. Now let's put something in the feedback loop for this. If you're wondering how to do that, we're going to look in here again. And for the feedback loop, instead of using the parentheses, we use brackets. This is a biquad, but you can see the same thing here. So you put this, and everything in here will be just in serial, and you separate it. It looks like a comma here, but you actually separate it by semicolons. So let's put some saturation in there. I don't think I did that in the previous video. So we're going to put a saturator in there, inside that feedback loop, inside the filter, and we're going to use this SAT, and D is going to control the dry wet, which is actually our drive knob. D is a drive knob, so that way we can turn on and off. Mode is how clipped it's going to be. So 0 is going to be like really soft clipping. I believe it goes all the way up to 8, which is fairly like hard clipping. So we're going to use that. Even harmonics. Normally you could use this to increase the amount of even harmonics, but it says do not use this. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So mode 1 to 8 for and even harmonics 0 to 10. Please do not use this in even harmonics in the feedback processing, as this will make the filter unstable. So don't use any even harmonics. We're just gonna not even pay attention. We're gonna ignore it completely. So put D, and then let's put 8. So we're gonna put our bracket in here. Boom. SAT. Sorry. Oh no. So I have this crazy Japanese keyboard. I can't tell exactly what I'm typing in. But anyways, here's D for drive, and we're going to use mode 8. There we go, and let's close that bracket. Boom. So now we have a feedback loop. And just so you can hear what this is doing, let's change this from a saw wave to a sine wave. I'm just doing this because it'll be easier for us to hear this. I'm going to move the frequency all the way up. It's not going to matter so much for this. So we have that sine wave. Now if we move the drive up here, doesn't do anything. Now let's try moving the feedback up. Seems louder, but that's just like what I was doing before. Now we have the feedback up. Let's move the drive up. You can see those harmonics coming from the drive, and that's inside of the filter. I'll try changing it so you can hear what the different modes do. It's on 8 now, but let's try moving it to like 2 or 1, etc. So you can see the different modes. If you look here, you can see like 8, it's adding more harmonics. Lower levels, it's adding fewer. And you can also increase the intensity or decrease the intensity with the drive knob. Now, this is always on, but just with saw waves, it's a little bit hard to hear. So I just thought I'd put it there so you think, oh, it does actually work. I'm not lying to you. So let's move the feedback down here. And another thing we want to put in here is just like I showed you before. We don't want that. So we're going to put a high pass filter inside this feedback loop. So right after the drive, we'll put high pass 6, and we'll set this to 200 hertz. So now we can do the same thing. And you see, as we're getting down here, the Q value is going down, which is what we want. But that, actually, if I move it up here, it still works. If you notice though, as you move the feedback up, the Q value seems to kind of flatten out. So keep that in mind. So it depends on how much feedback you want, but that's just something to think about. Even when the feedback is at 0 though, you can still hear the effect of that high pass filter. So just keep that in mind. You don't need to use feedback to get the high pass 6 filter effect. Some people ask me also, can I get this high pass filter to kind of move with the frequency? If I just set it at the frequency, it's not going to be good. I need it to be much, much lower than the actual frequency. Now, I was thinking about how can I do this successfully, and the way that I figured out is by using the square root of the frequency and then multiplying it by 10. And that's just because to get this value, we want like a lower number. So whatever our frequency is, if we take the square root of it, that's going to get us a fairly low number, but it'll be like maybe 44 or something. And so we need to multiply by 10 to get 40. So let me take out my calculator here and see if I can actually give you some examples. So if I had this like constant mode and I set this at, let's say 700 here, okay? So if I look inside my calculator and I think like, okay, what is the square root of 700? It's 26, but that's too low of a value. I don't want the HP filter starting here, but I might take that times 10, which is 260, which means HP filter starting here, which is closer to what we want. Now, you probably like, okay, how am I going to do this inside this algorithm? And it's actually fairly simple. If you look inside here, besides all the different filters and things, if you look in the syntax here, you can see it does lots of functions like addition, subtraction, multiplication, etc. You have this absolute value here, and then square root. So SQR, and then use our parentheses here. So instead of this 200, we're going to use SQR, parentheses, F, and then we're going to multiply that by 10. So hopefully that will give us the correct value. Maybe. It's not looking like it. Was it SQR or SQRT? I always forget. SQRT. Yeah, that's the square root. So let's try it now. You see, as we're getting close to our fundamental here, the Q value is going down. I'll play it a little bit lower. And people are wondering, like, what if you play higher? So let's play something higher. All right, probably too high. So you can see that Q value decreasing as we are getting lower in frequency. So not a perfect solution, and you still see some Q value, but it is much lower, and you're not getting those bumps as you're getting close to the fundamental frequency. So that's something you can do. Hopefully that gave you an idea of some things you can do. And if you're wondering, like, okay, this is great, but what if I want not a 12 decibel per octave filter, like what we have here? If you want 24, all you have to do is just double this. So with all these, if you put a number in front of it, it'll multiply it by itself. So now we have a 12 decibel per octave filter. We doubled it. Now it's a 24 decibel per octave filter. Just look at the bottom here and you can see what's happening. 12, 24. And everything still works, like the feedback, etc. Another thing, if you're thinking like negative feedback, if you don't want the negative feedback even in there, you think like this is kind of annoying and I don't want people to go in there and blow their speakers out like this, you can just use the absolute value of this so that never goes negative. So right now in here, you see FB. If we look in here in that syntax again, you see basic mathematical function, absolute value. So no matter what you do, if it's -3, that just becomes 3. So we ABS times X, or ABS times FB in this case. ABS feedback. Make sure I put that closing parentheses there. And so there we have it. Both values are the same. So if that's what you wanted, you can do that. Another thing you could do is if you wanted not a 24 decibel or not a 12 decibel, but an 18 decibel per octave filter, just go here. I'll take this 2 off. And we use like the normal LP, but we'll use LP6 here. Make sure you put the semicolon afterwards. And now we have an 18 decibel per octave filter here. So that's something else you can do. So not only can you get 12 decibel per octave filters, but also 18 decibel per octave filters, 24 decibel per octave filters. If you want 36 decibel per octave filters, erase this and multiply it times 3. So 3 times 12, 36. Probably way too much Q value. Do 48, just add 4, etc. So the same thing applies. Also, if, let's see, I'll take this down a bit. Not 23 decibel per octave, that's kind of crazy. I'll do 24 decibel per octaves. So we have that. And if you want some, let's say, saturation outside of the feedback loop, of course, I think in the last video I showed you how you could add a saturator before this. You could also add one after this, but it's actually much easier than that. Just use this saturation here, and you can get lots of saturation after the filter like this. So by doing that, you can get some saturation afterwards if you want to get really dirty. But hopefully I showed you how you could add different things inside the feedback loop. Be a little bit careful with this because some of the things will cause the filter to blow up. So make sure you always have that limiter on so it doesn't get too loud. But experiment with that and you can probably find some interesting things in there. And hopefully I showed you a bit more about the syntax here. As I said, be a little bit careful because you kind of really need to read what's in here. And this may need to be updated because, as I said, I believe this parameter analog is in here for the fast filter, but it's not showing it here. So if you're doing it this way and you're wondering like, why is my feedback not working? What's going on? It's because there's a hidden parameter here for the analog. So just add another semicolon and it should work perfectly. But that's it for today. If you have any more questions about this, please leave them down below. If you like this, give me a thumbs up and check out all the other plugins at melterproduction.com. Till next time, see you.